and thank you, all of you, for those 2 days of thought-provoking presentation and discussion. And just give me 1 second to download my presentation. So in my presentation, I want to... Po prostu jestem beznadziejna w touchpadzie.
Daj, zrobić.
Okay.
Nie mogę.
Coś jest takie łatwe.
O, nie ruszę się. Co ci? Wiesz, to się nie rusza. Czekaj, zamknijmy to. Nie możemy przesunąć. Bliżej, dobrze. Okej, jest. Dobra. Jak to tu? Okej, proszę.
So in my presentation, I want to discuss the documental status of artworks constituting the aesthetic of administration in the conceptual art of the 1970s. By using Hungarian neo-avant-garde practice as a case study, I want to present a different approach to the administrational dimension of social reality that at the time was intensively explored by conceptual artists throughout the world, presenting diverse relations to administrative processes as a medium of art. This kind of artistic documental engagement in the institutional order of social space blurs the binary division between official and unofficial practice, autonomy and heteronomy of art, often replacing radical gesture within the need of maintaining its implication. Such an institutional reading of the anti-institutional past seems a breakneck task, but I think worth undertaking, as today crisis of public institutions requires reinvention of the very institution itself, and the 70s experiments offered a different way of thinking about the organizing social reality. I argue that Hungarian artists in the 1970s used documents, reports, stamps, or official language as a tool to offer collective administration in opposition to state bureaucracy, using Marx's critique of it as a power misuse and maintained hierarchy. By analyzing art curated in the circle of Georgi Galantai as the appeal art of Pieter Legendi, sorry for pronunciation, the formalness of an everyday object of Geza Pernecki, the collective stamping in the exhibition titled Everybody with Anybody, organized by Artpool, and the Artpool itself as an experimental institution. I want to stress 3 aspects of the collective administration. The first aspect is the critique of bureaucracy and what Marx called the bureaucratic mind. Second is the discovery of the performative status of social objects understood as documents and the introduction of body into the office. And the last one is the maintenance of the performative capacity of documents as they still constitute institutions such as Artpool. I draw my research upon the notion of documentality introduced by Italian philosopher Maurizio Ferraris and the aesthetic of politics defined by Jacques Rancière, mentioned yesterday by Jarosław Kozłowski. In his theory, Ferraris suggests that an object equals a written act, and therefore they produce social reality. The performative act is fixed in the document, which can organize social, legal, and institutional reality. We just do not collectively agree to perceive some paper or a piece of land as a money or a country. It's conditioned by a series of laws, edicts, and bills. Recordings and inscriptions in the form of documents create and change the social order, hence they possess the performative capacity and give the base to institutions. So Ferrari's social ontology has a very interesting pragmatic dimension and application. The way we keep documents, the way we guard or give access to them, the way they are described or displayed, the fact if they are owned, if they can be sold, what infrastructure around themselves they create, what kind of labor they demand, and what is the status of that labor, who has the agency over them, between whom documents negotiate its meaning, what is the established hierarchy. All of those aspects allowed to analyze artworks together with its administrational performative production and ramification they have for institutional order. To do so, I meet Ferrari's concept of social ontology with Jacques Rancier's aesthetic of politics. The French philosopher introduced the notion of distribution of the sensible, which consists of the constitution of the sensible experience of the common world and deciding who is able to share this experience, which always has a political consequences. The establishment of what is common and who has the right to be an active subject within the social order is then conditioned and maintained by the performative work of documents. Within such a context, aesthetic of administration allow us to analyze administrative language which uses filling in forms, creating hierarchies and alternative institutions, making stamps and writing reports as a socially engaged activity. However, as the term aesthetic of administration has already been used in art history to describe a rather different approach to administrative language in art, let me shortly retrieve it from the capitalist inactivity. I propose to reclaim a booklog term for a kind of the universalization and the westernization of it in order to extract the active and social engagement of art into documentality. I believe it allows a broader analysis of the 1970s art, which used administrative forms. In his book, The Utopia of Rules on Technology, Stupidity, and the Secret Joys of Bureaucracy, David Graeber indicates that in the 1970s, the 1970s saw a surge of interest in bureaucracy in culture and academic literature, gaining momentum with its critique in the aftermath of the 1968 events. Characteristically, according to the researcher, after the 1970s, reflection on it fades with an inversely proportional growth of bureaucracy in everyday life. This makes the artist's turn to administrative language in the 1970s seem all the more symptomatic, indicating a recognition of the documentary nature of the social order, underlying the way institutions operate. So artists of the 1970s used administrative tools as a form of counteracting this pathological dimension of bureaucracy described by Marx. In his vision, bureaucracy is not a rationalization, as Max Weber characterized it, but a pathology of the state. So those artists of the artists from the 1970s used those tools as a practice of social engagement that proposed different social strategies in a different political and economic context. Hence, it was not merely a visual reference to mocked official language of the state, but deep engagement into the reinventing institutional order. In contrast to the apolitical autonomy-seeking art language of the Western logocentrists, described by Booklog, other conceptual artists of the 1970s often use bureaucratic language to introduce an administration of care, like we see, this is example of Merle Lederman Ukeles, which didn't introduce any anti-institutional approach, but engage into ongoing cooperation with municipal services in New York. So Hungarian artists abolish the bureaucratic apparatus in a Marxist gesture and introduce a collective administration in its place as an alternative mode of documental order, and I will try to describe this process. So during the socialist period, Hungarian society was ruled by a powerful elite of bureaucrats who held much concentrated power. Eva Forgacz states that between 1958 and 1960, the János Kadar administration transformed socialist institution associated with the arts, leading to the state's monopoly in purchases of artworks, control of exhibition venues and artists' access to studio spaces and stipend. Kadar's measures against dissidents and artists were no drastic. Instead of imprisonment, he used extensive bureaucratic apparatus. Hence, for the artistic process of anti- and self-institutionalization, it was crucial to recognize the existing power conditions of what could be called after Marx the bureaucratic mind. For this process, a symptomatic work was created by Peter Legendy for the Direct Week exhibition and series of events organized by Julia Power and Tamás Szentjoby in 1972 as a part of the festival in Balaton-Boglar Chapel Studio, transformed in 1970 from an abandoned chapel into an exhibition space for experimental art by Georgi Galantai. Legendy's appeal art Magdalena Radomska defines as one proposal of the artistic movement of the Hungarian neo-avant-garde. Legendy directly uses documentality as a medium in its radical form, a bureaucratic form that formalizes institutional order and power. Radomska emphasizes that here the manifesto of appeal art is created by an appeal form filled out by the artist in the boxes of which the object of appeal is written out in official language. From often repeated complaint to appropriate authority, Legendy in fact appealed for appropriate authority. However, this can only be done by undertaking a formal game with official language. Instead of a protest, an appeal letter. For Marx, bureaucracy was distinguished by its distant nature, hierarchical, mysterious and formalistic operation, and loyalty to the hierarchy rather than society. As Jasmina Tumba states, the experimental art in Hungary was particularly harassed by bureaucratic demands. Pushed to the margins of culture, it became invisible. Hence, the adaptation of bureaucratic form was a political gesture. As Galantai said at the time, artist and himself intensively studied Marxist aesthetic and identified with communist theories in order to challenge the authorities. With Legendy's appeal art, the Hungarian bureaucracy reached the point of absurdity. Marx argued that bureaucracy, being the epitome of the state, is its formalization. It makes formal goals its content and therefore falls into contradiction with the real goals of the society. For the bureaucracy, form is content, so it is interested in autonomy. It is not without reason that Legendy's appeal application presents itself precisely formally and almost officially, which is emphasized by the personal data boxes, the justification of the appeal, and the artist's signature. However, the document was not furnished to the Hungarian office, and the purpose of the appeal was to fill it out itself. The natural tendency of bureaucracy, according to Marx, is to strive to make it independent, to get out from under any guardianship, and above all from the guardianship of society. That's why it was so important for Legendy to address the proposal to the Hungarian public and acknowledge that the appeal is the art of the people. By doing so, the artist forced bureaucratic reason, bureaucratic mind, to confront itself with what was outside of its logic, the public, the society. Bureaucratic mind means, in Marx's words, the bureaucracy's subjective approach to the reality around it, determined by hierarchy and consequently the operation of a double vision of the same matters, bureaucratic and reality outside it. Thus, Legendy in the format of appeal confronts those two realms within one document, a bureaucratic form and the social content demanding a proper government. This confrontation of bureaucratic mind with its logic had administrative consequences. The chapel studio was closed in part through the policies and practices of Georgi Achel, serving as the chief Communist Party ideologue during the 1970s and much of the 1980s. Achel implemented guidelines for the party, sustained the centrally organized state institutions for the teaching, funding, and the exhibits of the fine arts. As Tombas describes, the police carried out these policies through intimidation, repeated checkups, and arrests at the chapel studio. Zaczekać godzinę, tak? So yes, police carried out these policies through intimidation, repeat checkups, and arrests at the chapel studio. Galantai recalled that the members of the cultural administration often searched for overtly political content in the exhibited artworks. For him, it was quite a surprise that they did not take any action in connection with Tamas Shentiobi inscription, which read, "Art is everything that is forbidden, be forbidden," the work that was mentioned. But they found something objectionable in Peter Legendi text titled "Dear Visitor," posted on the door, which led them to comment that Galantai will do a stretch for this one. According to Marx, the bureaucratic mind confronted with the questioning bureaucratic order and its decision will always turn against appeal applicant, against society. As for it, the imposed order can't be wrong, and any possible error must be caused by the society. Hence the reaction of authorities for Peter's Legendi's art is not so surprising, as well the fact that the very bureaucratic methods was used against the chapel and Galantai, resulting in the false accusation that the chapel was closed for reasons of health. And the game of duplicity of the appeal. I just want to show you the Artpool website, but I have some problem doing that. Okay. The game of duplicity of the appeal between bureaucratic and the social reality is still maintained in the way the work is present on the Artpool archive website. If you hover over the appeal form of Legendi to zoom its content, it immediately disappears to appear as an empty form ready to be filled in with the new application. It's a kind of impossible to grasp the Legendi's appeal, and you end up confronted with the need of writing your own, which reminds us that the appeal is the art of the people, and administrational and institutional mechanism requires constant redefinition. So it's kind of maintain this performative capacity of the document. So after the 6 years following the closing of the chapel studio, Galantai entered the International Mail Art Network in 1979. As Tumbas noticed, mail art used the state's official postal system, the very institution that maintained the policing mechanism of the government. So again, the bureaucratic mechanism was used to search for other type of connection. The international exchange and ethical bond created with the recipient were then the basis on which Georgi Galantai developed his idea of the institution. Together with Julia Klanicaj, they founded Artpool in Budapest, the experimental active art archive of East Central European, active art archive of East Central Europe for producing, networking, curating, and researching art. In his manifesto for the institution, Galantai emphasized that the active archive does not only collect material already existing out there, but the way it operates also generates the very material to be archived. The phrase, the way it operates also generates the very material, is crucial for understanding art pool as a proposition of new documentality based on collective administration. As the main focus of the art pool is the perpetual reconceptualization of itself as an art institution, as Zsuzsa Laszlo stresses. It is particularly interesting how this institution maintained the very performative potential of its documents as social objects, what could be defined after Galantai as a trans functionings, and what I try to present with appeal art on the website. The speculative attitude toward time and the status of the archive during economic and political changes reveals how official and unofficial art mutually determining each other. Under police bureaucratic surveillance, Galantai redefined the institution, which converted to an NGO after the 1989 and now operates as a department of the Budapest Museum of Fine Art, introducing alternative administration to official institution. One might say that symbolic and collective administrative acceptance of this new institution took place in 1982 during the exhibition Everybody with Anybody, which was the first Hungarian art rubber stamp competition and action that took place in the Young Artist Club in Budapest. With rubber stamps hanging from the ceiling ready to use in a most creative and spontaneous manner, the space became a kind of chaotic, anarchic office. One of the objectives was the manifestation of the childlike state of no control, the degree of freedom in adulthood. In the conversation between Galantai and artist Miklos Erdeli, published on Artpool website, Erdeli described the event. It made stamping get its bureaucratic character lost. Bureaucratic stamping is quite another thing. It has nothing to do with creativity, not even playing. It reminds me much rather of the shameless simplicity expressed in a gunshot. Something to have anything radically done with. Something extremely simply to solve extremely difficult problems, such as taking somebody's life. Pulling the trigger, and that's all there is to it. That is bureaucracy. As for children's toys guns, they combine easy creation, playing, with a quick like a shot disposal. Playing means something like a creation at a low cost. It is the illusion and experience of it. Bureaucratic stamping combines motives of infantilism and aggression, end of quote. The radicalness of the gesture of stamping during the exhibition consists on Rancière's misuse of the bureaucratic stamping. The misuse of established ways of conducting has essentially political implication for Rancière, as it creates gaps in the distribution of the sensible. This excessive, playful stampings, however, was not reduced to merely mock the bureaucratic order. Artists and the public created improvised artworks with rubber stamps, which were hard to combine in Hungary at the time. Tumbas mentioned that the government did not permit rubber stamps for private individuals because of the fear that they would be confused with official stamps. Galantai asked a number of artists to design stamps and hired one engraver to produce the stamps illegally. So the gesture has a double meaning. It criticizes the state bureaucratic order and projects different collective administration as the potentially new distribution of the sensible at the same time, problematizing the nature of illegal action. The stamps were no certifying anything, or rather stamps were certifying everything. So everyone obtained the agency and the power of legitimization. In the hall of the exhibition space, the famous scene from the closely watched trains in which the train dispatcher stamps a young female worker's bare butt was screening in a loop. The practice can be found in Andreton's stamping as well. Also, the audience and artists stamped their hands and faces in dialogue with the intimacy of the film. Maurizio Ferraris states that for the bureaucratic power, it is crucial to separate the office from the individual, from the person. So the office has no flesh. Just to mention photographs of Janos Kadar or any other official as an embodiment of the office of the authority. During this collective stamping, the body was merged or integrated again with the office in radical rejection of the bureaucratic autonomy and formality. At the same time, the body became a document, signed and certified by many stamps in a collective legitimization. Because I am running out of time, so maybe to sum up, I just want to close with the stamp of Geza Pernecki stamp that you can find on your bags and in some other places during the conference, just to kind of address this revolutionary gesture in administration and presenting the way how we can kind of maintain the performative potential and capacity of those documental practices. As Maurizio Ferrari stresses that documentality is a necessary condition for the existence of something like a society in which power can come into being and the way we work with the document. Or we are managed by the documents is crucial to determine what the kind of society is going to be built. As many of the experimental concept artworks and anti-institutions were subordinated over time to the capital logic and centralized institutions and narratives, it is important to reactivate performative potential of those documents that carries those different administrational and institutional solutions.
Thank you very much.